Alright, so I finally got my video out for the jumper T-Lite. Seems like everyone in the world is now jumping on the small radio bandwagon. Seems not too long ago everyone was, all into the big radios like the QX7, the really giant ones that weigh like 10 pounds that I absolutely hate. I've always loved these smaller radios. I mean, you guys have seen on my channel. I had the jumper T12 for the longest time, and then I transitioned away from that to even go to a smaller radio, the TBS Tango 2 with the multi-protocol module. You guys have seen videos on this already, and I'll give you my ideas on comparisons between these and kind of what this radio is, kind of who this is really for, and also how that would compare to something like the Lite Radio 2, the really budget model. So, I've been using this for a while now, and I've gotten an idea of what the good things are and some of the downsides, and I'll explain those at the more towards the end, because I have to get through some of the good stuff first to explain why the bad stuff is bad. And so if you want to get that information, you have to keep watching the rest of the video. So we'll get right into all the good stuff. For the price that you pay for this, now I would recommend that you get the one with the 4-in-1 module and not just the one with the FreeSky module. You're going to get access to 4 different radio chips versus just one for the additional, I think, $10. It's totally worth it. And I would only get the cheaper one if you're for sure not going to be using things like Spectrum or FlySky or any of the toy protocols. I don't fall in that camp, so I would definitely pay the extra $10. It's like $75 versus $65. Now, if you really are on a tight budget and you definitely know you won't be using any of the other stuff, yeah, should go for the $65 one. But for the price that this is pretty good quality. You get a lot of features, and for the money, I think it's a good product. Now, there's definitely some downsides. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But, when you consider the price and considering this is a budget model, it's really hard to, be very critical of this radio like some people are being online. Given the fact there are some downsides, and yeah, you can be critical about it, but, I think that if we're targeting those folks that were looking for all those features, those additional features, they could price the radio a little bit higher. And so, Jumper, if you're listening, I would suggest making maybe a pro version of this, like the T-Lite Pro, and address some of those shortcomings, which I'll talk about later, and increase the price to say about $100. I mean, the Jumper T12 is a little over $100 and doesn't have any of those issues. So something like this in this size as a pro version, a little bit higher price point, I think would address a lot of those problems and would, I think a lot more people will actually enjoy it. Now, given the fact that it is a budget model, and it has those limitations, I'm considering it based on that, and I'm thinking that at $75, if you don't need some of those high-end features that are problematic, then this is going to be totally fine for you guys. And, in terms of the build quality, it's definitely pretty good, decent. It does have a little bit of creaking if you twist it. It's very subtle. The gimbals, of course, are Hall sensor gimbals. They're the same as on the T12, the ones that I've always enjoyed. Now, I've used the T12 for a while, and the springs on these are getting kind of creaky. You can kind of hear a little bit of a noise that it makes. Doesn't bother me too much, but I think it's because where the springs are grabbing onto the plastic, it's rubbing and it's causing a little bit of noise. Now, these are brand new gimbals here on this one, so, after a week of use, it sounds totally brand new. You don't have that creaking. Perhaps they've changed the way that the springs are attached. I don't know. That they look the same to me. The gimbals look the same. So, I've had no problems with centering or jitters. These have been pretty decent. Even on the T12 I've been using for about a year, no issues there. But I know that there are some people that have had some quality control issues. Thinking that's probably more the exception than the rule. Of course, that's all anecdotal from the internet. Now, in terms of like the fit and finish, the soft touch plastic is very nice. I'm not sure how long that's going to hold up in terms of like if you have like really oily hands, for example, they'll tend to rub off. The printing on here, it doesn't look like it's printed on top of the paint, so it may rub off over time. But of course, are you rubbing your fingers over here that often? Probably not. Maybe when you're using these buttons here, that could be a problem over time. But if you're using these buttons enough, you'll probably know what these all mean and memorize them. And regarding the button layout, it's fairly intuitive. It's not terribly awkward. I'll kind of walk you through some of that here in this video. The switch positions here do bother me. So normally all the switches should be away from you, and then when you turn on the radio on, that's the default position, and it won't give you that switch warning, right? So you have to actually adjust that in the radio settings. I'll show you that here in a second. But when it's in this default position where the switches are away from you, and I tend to use a two-position switch for arming. I would say arm like on this one here. Then the space here for your finger, and this is how I would normally hold it, right here. It's very tight. So you could, if you're arming in this direction, and then you maybe make an inadvertent movement, all of a sudden you're disarming your quad, which is bad. So what I've done is I've actually changed for the model, the default position when the radio turns on is the switches towards me, and then when I arm, I actually arm with this switch away from me. So then I have plenty of space here, no problem. And then if I want to disarm, then I can basically move my finger to the other side here and then pull towards me to disarm. So it's more unlikely that I'll be accidentally disarming in this configuration. And I'll show you how to change that a little later. Not a big deal. It's very light. I'll show you the weight here and comparison to the other ones in a second. Now, there's this 3D printed mount. You can pick this up as an STL file from the Makerfire product page. So the link's in the description for that. Just an M2 screw here for those 2 holes in that print. And then there's an M3 hole that goes into the Hawkeye monitor. And folds down nicely, as you can see. Just touch the sticks a little bit here, but it goes all the way down. Now, if you happen to use the bigger 3.5-inch monitor, so the 2.5-inch monitor, the sticks will be spread apart. So I don't know if you like that or not. Plus, it's a lot heavier, so I don't really fly through the monitor, so I just think it's kind of cool that it's there, and you can check your settings and stuff really quickly if you fly analog, of course. But lately I'm flying mostly DJI, so I'm probably going to end up taking this off and not using it. But for those of you guys maybe want a nice little compact whip setup, and you don't want to be flying through goggles, you can fly through this. It's not terribly easy, but a nice little way to do that. And then you can have a nice little whip setup and fly pretty much anywhere, kind of guerrilla style, very stealth, and quickly get in and out of places. Now these little switch covers here, they're not included. I forget where I picked them up. I'll link all the stuff down in the description, but I think I got these from Race Day Quads, and I pulled them off of the T12. I'm probably going to move my stick ends as well from the T12 over to this one as well, because I'm probably going to be using this more in the future, assuming I can figure out the external module situation here. So in order to get inside, you can take the cover off. Is an 18650 battery in here, or it's not included, but you have to use an 18650 battery to power this. The way this fits on here, I use a little piece of foam here to hold the battery in place. It's a flat top battery to get the best connection, and I had to bend this pin a little bit out, otherwise the battery would kind of rattle around in here. And then I add this little piece of foam in here so that the battery wouldn't rattle around. If it's rattling around, it's more likely that the battery will lose its contact and the radio will shut down. So, again, fit and finish, not the absolute best. I would say I would give it a 7 out of 10, considering the price. There's definitely better ones out there like the Tango 2. Of course, you're paying quite a bit more for that. So in order to add an external module, you have to pull this little sticker off here. And then they have a little adapter that looks like basically a module bay that's on the X-Lite. In fact, it's the exact same pin out. And then there's a little connector here that connects to the main board. So in order to put this module bay or adapter on, pull the sticker off, there's 3 screw holes for and then 3 screws included for this to attach to the back of the casing. But to get inside, you have to take the battery cover off. There's 2 screws that you have to remove there, as well as 3 in each of the handles. And then the cover will come off. You have to plug in, basically run the wire through the little hole here into the plug, and then you screw the adapter onto the back. Now, I'm not actually intending to use this. I did actually try to see how this would work in terms of the power setup with a full-size Crossfire. So basically, I used the adapter board, plugged it into the back of the board here on the T-Lite, and then I used the JR module adapter that plugs into another adapter that plugs into this adapter. So it's like 3 adapters. So it's a huge bulky mess. And I did confirm it does work. You can run it in Crossfire mode. But there's a huge power problem when you're drawing that much power from this battery, which I don't have a very good battery in here. It's an okay battery. It's not the best. You get a huge voltage sag. So it went from like 4 volts to, I don't know, like 3.5 volts pretty much right away as soon as I bumped up the power on the Crossfire. And this radio will give you a low battery warning at 3.4 volts, and my radio turns off at 3.3 volts. So this is the big downside that everyone's complaining about this radio, is the power setup on this. For one thing, when this shuts off at 3.3 volts, assuming you're just using it normally, you're not able to utilize the full capacity of the 18650 battery, which you can, in a lot of cases, can discharge you down to as low as 2.5 volts. Now, obviously, the current output of the battery will be lower as the voltage is lower. So, how useful it is at below 3 volts is kind of debatable, but it's a little disappointing that it only lets you go down to 3.3 volts. So I think this is something they could correct if they use some more better components for the power setup, but of course that'll increase the price. Again, I think, they're trying to meet that $75 price target, and so they got to cut some corners, and that's how this radio came to be. I think that they did do a lot of, investigation in terms of like what people would pay, and people were looking at and comparing it to the Lite Radio 2, which is $40. You can only get so much for $40. They had to add a screen. You have a multi-protocol module in here. It's got USB charging. It's a lot of things that you have to add, and those things add cost. So I think they skimped out on the power setup, not really anticipating that people would use this with like external modules like our Crossfire or the Ghost module. So they do say that it's officially supported, the Ghost Nano and the Crossfire Nano, which I don't have either one of those, so I can't test those. But they're saying that they initially said that it was only supported up to 25 milliwatts. And then people complained about that. I actually haven't tested it at all. And a little later, they put out another statement saying that if you use a better quality 18650 battery that can basically output additional current, so something that can output maybe 10 to 15 amps of current, versus say a poor battery like I have here that can only maybe output maybe 5 amps, then you can have those problems where the voltage sag causes the voltage to go down, and then the whole system just shuts off. But if you put a better battery in here, like they're saying, like a Sony VTC6, which I think it goes up to 30 amps or 40 amps. Basically, it'll be fine in terms of the current draw. Then the voltage won't sag as much, and they're saying that they're testing that they did, I think, 1 watt of power on the Crossfire Nano up to 5 kilometers. So of course, the further away you fly, the more power it's going to use. So that's where the current draw on the battery is going to come into play. I haven't tested any of this stuff. I have some better batteries on the way. I've actually ordered some Molicel 35 amp batteries. So I'm going to test that with the actual full-size Crossfire, and that'll be in another video because this video is already way too long. But basically, I'm going to get rid of all those adapters and stuff. That's why I'm not installing this adapter on the back of this one. I'm going to actually directly wire the full-size Crossfire into the back of the board on the T-Lite. Technically, I think it's possible. I did find some tutorials on how to do it with an X-Lite. So the wiring is a little bit different here because there's a little power, there's a voltage step-up adapter right there. You can see in green on this adapter board that steps up the voltage from like whatever the battery is outputting to I think 7.8 volts. I know that the Crossfire can go down to 3.5 volts. So if this LiPo, the radio shuts down at 3.3 volts, we'll see. I'm still debating what to do about that, and plus I need to get that battery for the video. Anyway, that's the major downside on this radio. And so if you're wanting to get this primarily for long range and you're going to be putting a Crossfire Nano or a Ghost Nano in the back here, I would wait to see what the testing results prove. I think I may actually get a Crossfire Nano or a Ghost Nano and test it with the higher end battery and see how that does. Definitely the full-size Crossfire at more than 1 watt, you're going to probably have to use external XT30 battery anyway. But yeah, again, that'll be in another video. That's going to require some extensive testing to see how much power is being drawn on this at further distances. So that'll be in a future video. All right, so let's go ahead and power this up real quick. And let me show you. You can hear the speaker is quite loud. That's pretty nice. So you have a standard 128 by 64 pixel screen. It's a 1.3 inch screen, very bright. In fact, I actually turned the brightness down. And it's your standard layout. It's running OpenTX, I think 2.3.11. And I actually have the SD card contents in here. SD card is not included. So I have like a 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabyte micro SD card in there. I downloaded the SD card contents from the T12 from version 2.3.11, and it's got the latest download version. I think it's 2.3 version 0035, I believe. I'll put a screenshot up here where I downloaded. It's the latest version as of like January 2021. And that'll give you the voice files that you just heard from the speaker. Normally, if you turn it on, you don't get that. Yeah, but if you were looking for the SD card contents, that's where you can get it from. Now, for the most part, I haven't had any problems with like D8 receivers, FlySky receivers. I did try a few other toy protocols. It will all work fine. The XM Plus receiver was giving me some problems. I had to actually go into that model and go in here. And I had to change the frequency tune here. So normally I adjust that after I bind, but it wouldn't let me bind until I made an adjustment on this number first. So I tried it on a positive number, it didn't work. And then I went to a negative number, and I think about a -6 worked for me. Now your radio might be different. So I actually asked around, and other people didn't have any problems binding with XM Plus receivers. So if you do, adjust your frequency tune value there, and then do the bind. Normally I can do the bind and then I can make the adjustment after it, but I wouldn't even bind until I did that first. That was the only quirk or problem I had with this radio. Otherwise, everything else worked pretty much the same as on the T12. Now, in terms of the overall interface here, it's pretty standard, pretty straightforward. You have an enter button, back button, up and down button, model and system button, and then these system and model buttons act as a page back and page forward button once you get into one of the menus here. So if we long press the system button, that'll bring up the system menu, and then to page forward you hit the model button. You see that? And then to page back you just hit the system button, it'll page backwards. Then up and down works normally as you would expect. And then, by the way, I did upgrade the firmware on my internal module. I just put that in the SD card there. So hit enter to go into that directory, and you can see here I downloaded that from the multi-module website. This is the latest version 1.3.2.12. The Well, I upgraded the one end, the firmware on here because I was having that problem with the XM Plus receiver binding, and that didn't make any difference. But you know, the update procedure is the same. You long press the file here, and then you can just select Flash Internal Multi, just like before. There's really no difference in terms of how to upgrade the internal module firmware. It's basically the same as before. And one other thing to note here, if you go into the system settings, and if you go down to the firmware options, the firmware that's compiled on here, that was compiled by Jumper, has Crossfire, Ghost, AF, HDS3, Internal multi-module, and Lua C as basically compiled options. So it looks like a lot of the Ghost Nano, the Crossfire Nano, I think even like the FlySky module is supported on this firmware. So if you go into OpenTX Companion, there's no newer version because this is based on, I think, the latest version anyway, 2.3.11. I think that official OpenTX support's coming in version 2.4. I haven't heard which one or when that's coming out, but if you're wondering why it's not in there yet, it's because it's not officially supported yet, but it will be in the future. Anyway, I think it's going to cover for this video. I'm going to have another video later with my testing on the Crossfire, the full-size Crossfire module, and how to set that up. Now, if you have any questions in terms of like additional videos you'd like to see, maybe like a model setup, that stuff's kind of like all OpenTX based anyway. So if there's, if you find videos on recent OpenTX tutorials, you'll find how to set up a model. It's exactly the same on this radio. It's not really any different. But if you really want to see something very specific to this radio, let me know in the comments, and I'll maybe make additional videos on that if there's enough interest from the general audience out there. But overall, I like the radio. I like it at the price point it is at. Now, whether or not it'll let me switch from the Tango 2, which, I mainly use Crossfire now, and sometimes I use the multi-protocol module on the back, it's going to be hard to say. Like, I do like the fact that these gimbals are more to my liking in terms of the spring tension. The weight is more to my liking than the Tango 2, but the Tango 2 works with Crossfire at a higher power output out of the box without any hacks or weird stuff that needs to be happening. And that is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be switching right away until I figure out all these power issues. So that'll come down in another video. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.